Hello, welcome back to part 2 of the K2 Science of Reading Evidence-Based Moves of Phonics. This is a continuation of the last section where we were really thinking about how to explicitly teach phonics, and so far we've talked about activating the phonological processor with brief exercises that are connected to the pattern being studied, as well as checking for understanding of the pattern and using explicit language and making that pattern visual as we explicitly teach the pattern. Today, we're going to continue on with the same learning target, refining our knowledge and implementation of the moves of effective phonics instruction through that lens of finding one or two very small little tweaks that we could use to bolster up the application of this science. The tool is linked there. This is the same set of slides that we were using from our first session, so you can find that video, find the tiny URL, and go ahead and get into those slides. So let's jump right in. The next section of our tool is explicitly teaching kids how to decode words that follow that pattern. So we have them hearing the sounds, we've taught them the pattern, and now we're going to use that pattern to both read and write words. It doesn't matter whether you start with reading first or writing first, both are equally important, two sides of the same coin. For the purpose of right now, we're going to jump into decoding, which is reading the words with the pattern. Probably the most challenging thing here is that we provide the word in print, but we do not say the word. That's the thing that always trips me up. So we say something like, today we're going to figure out the word C-A-T, not today we're going to read the word cat. As soon as you've said the word, you've taken away that cognitive work for students. You've already done the decoding for them. So just be really careful not to actually say the word, say the letters instead. As you're going through decoding, what you're doing is drawing attention between the graphemes, the letter patterns, and the phonemes, the sounds. And you're modeling how to match those sound symbol correspondence. Elkhorn and boxes can be a great way to do that. I'm going to go ahead and model my thinking, my routine of how I teach kids how to decode. That doesn't mean that my routine has to be your routine. There's lots of different ways to do it. But just in case it's helpful, you can see my approach and hear how I structure my language. So the first thing I would do is say, we have this word F-R-E-S-H. Let's figure that word out. The first thing we want to do is look, are there any letters working together in this word to represent one sound? And the student should respond, yes. The S and H are working together to make one sound. S and H is a digraph, two letters working together to make one sound. So I put those together in one box to show that one sound, two letters. Are there any other letters working together? Nope. Each one of the rest of the letters makes their own sound. So I'm going to put them all in their own box because each one is one letter per one sound. Then I draw my attention to the vowel. The vowel letter is E, one vowel followed by one or more consonants. That makes this pattern closed and the sound eh. Now I can blend the word. F, sh, fresh. Let's look at the next one. Are there any letters working together to represent one sound? Yes, the I and E are working together. Now, there's a consonant sound in between them, so I can't put them in the same box, but I am going to use these arrows to show how the I and E are working together. Are there any other letters working together? Nope. The T is a consonant sound working on its own. The W is a consonant sound working on its own. The I is that vowel sound. It is working with the E, but the E doesn't come next. The N is a consonant sound making its own sound. And then that E doesn't make a sound, so we're actually going to include it in the box with the N. Or the E doesn't make a sound, we're going to include it in the box with the N because remember, each box is a sound. And so if the E doesn't make a sound, it doesn't get its own box. So this represents how the I and E are working together to represent a sound, but there are still only 4 sounds. The vowel sound is one vowel followed by a consonant and an E. That makes the long vowel sound I. Blend the word with me. T, w, I, n. Twine. Let's look at this next one. Are there any letters working together to represent a sound? Yes, the O and W are working together. They are a vowel team. 2 letters working together to represent one vowel sound. The L is representing its own consonant sound. Now, OW can be a tricky vowel team because it can produce 2 sounds, O or ow. The most common sound is O. So since I don't know what this word is, I'm going to try the more common sound. Owl, owl. I don't think I've heard of that before. Now I'm going to try the less common sound. Owl, owl. That makes sense. So when you come to a vowel team, if it has two sounds, try the more common sound first and then try the less common sound so you have that consistent routine. Now sometimes we have words that don't cooperate with the way we think they should be run. We could still use the same pattern though. Let's look at this word down here, H-A-V-E. Are there any letters that appear to be working together to make one sound? Yes, the A and E appear like they should be working together to make one sound. Are there any other letters? Nope. The H is its own consonant sound. The V is its own consonant sound. Remember, the E doesn't make a sound, so it gets lumped in with that V. And then we have that vowel sound A. Now here's where things get a little bit tricky. This looks like it should be one vowel followed by a consonant in an E, that long vowel silent E pattern. So it looks like it should say A, ave, have. But we know have isn't a word. So this is an example where the A is not working the way that you think it should be working. It's a heart word, or a word that we just have to memorize that particular part. So if you are using different colors, or if you have a particular symbol, I know there's a heart on here somewhere, but it's not coming up right at the first view. What you want to do is do some sort of symbol or something that's going to show how this is the part of the word that we're going to have to memorize, that we're going to have to study. I found that heart there at the very end. There's my heart. So this is that part that we have to learn by heart, the part that we have to just kind of memorize. So then once we know that is the part that we have to memorize, that we have to learn by heart, we can tell them, in this case, the A is not saying A, like the vowel consonant E pattern, it is saying av. You could go into explaining how in English we don't have words that end with V, so we tuck that E on the end, even though it doesn't change the vowel sound, but that's probably more than kids need to know. We just want to highlight for them, in this case, the A is what's not acting in the way you would expect. It's a short vowel sound. Av, have. So that's my routine. I like to start by asking, are there any vowel letters working together to represent a sound, so it starts to reduce the number of letters they have to attend to and really shows them how many sounds they're dealing with. Then I always focus on the vowel and the syllable type. That helps me to know how to read that vowel sound. Finally, I go with sounding and blending the whole word. So it doesn't have to be that pattern for you, but the big thing to emphasize is that we're really showing kids where there are graphemes, spelling patterns, and how those patterns match with the various sounds that we've been studying. Now, this would be a great application activity that you could do back at your building so that you would have a chance to calibrate with different levels and how they approach their decoding instruction. So if you can find a different grade level partner, you could practice reading some of these words or teaching them as you would teach your students to read them. Just the tricky thing is, make sure that you are not saying the word first. It's not, we're learning the word stick, let's figure out how to read it. It's, we're learning the word S-T-I-C-K. Let's figure out a strategy for figuring it out. So that wraps up the decoding side, where you start with the symbol, you match on the sounds, and you read the word. Encoding is the opposite side of that. You start with the sounds, and you match them to letters in order to write the word. As we were doing our observations across our system, this is really a place that we excelled across the board. Teachers were doing an excellent job of presenting that word, having students say the word with them, stretching out the sounds, and then writing those sounds using the appropriate graphemes. You can continue to use Elkonin boxes to reinforce those spelling patterns. And really the only thing to highlight from this section is that it does mention explicitly reinforcing phonics learning in writing in words as well as sentences. Now, the tricky thing about getting to the sentence level is that that just takes time and routine. And especially when we're thinking about our lowest primary grades, that can be a lot to manage. A whole classroom trying to write a sentence with various working memory and all the different skills that go into it, including fine motor and organization, print concepts, and that thing. So really, this is more of just a point of conversation. Where do you have time and space that you could maybe do some sentence dictation? What structures would you need to teach in order to make that successful? What skills could you embed in to make that a really meaningful task? It's a great time to reinforce good sentence construction with conventions as well as applying the pattern. And the nice thing about that is it's intentional transfer for kids. They're moving from just thinking, okay, I use this pattern during that small part of my reading block when we're using just those whiteboards and those boxes, to thinking, this is a pattern that I need to know for all writing. So this would be a great time to sync up with your team. How do they include sentence dictation? If your team isn't finding that very comfortable, reach out to the team either above or below you. How are they using sentence dictation? And what is a manageable routine that you could incorporate this in at least a couple of times across kids' experience? That's all I had for encoding, and so that wraps up the two sides of that coin, both encoding and decoding. The last evidence-based move on our phonics tool is connected text. So you'll notice that we have a decodable text routine as well as a regular connected text routine, and that's because the two different types of text are very different. With decodable text, there's such a high repetition of that pattern word that it makes sense that you can take time to highlight those pattern words, read just those pattern words, read the passage with the highlighted words in them, and then read the passage without highlighted words. With regular connected text, like grade level text or emergent level text, there isn't near as much of that pattern and repetition. Therefore, it would take a long time and a lot of skimming to find the one or two words that have the pattern, and that may not be an efficient use of your time. So instead, you want to approach it more as an incidental instruction when you come upon those words. As you're reading, when you finally find one of the pattern words, you pause and you use the decoding strategies that we already talked about. The big thing that we want to highlight for this section of the tool is that idea that it does mention applying in both decodable and non-decodable text. That doesn't mean that you need to do both decodable and non-decodable daily, but certainly across the week, you would want to make sure that kids have opportunities to explicitly apply the pattern in both types of text. So we know that we're reading other connected text, but if they're not actually applying the pattern ever in there, then that's probably not checking the box here. We really want to think about how are they intentionally applying the pattern in decodable, which is easy, that's the whole reason it was written, as well as intentionally applying the pattern in other connected text as well. And that just helps to promote transfer. So for this last little bit, what I was going to have you do, or what I had with the rest of our teachers, was focus again on that calibration conversation. It's time. That's always the biggest challenge. How frequently do you use decodable versus other connected text? We have limited amount of time, but if both are important, how are we using that time across the two different types of text? It would be time for you to sync up with your teammates and the vertical teammates around you about how these routines look. What does this actually look like in practice with real kids? And then finally, this is all just about pattern work, the phonics. We know that there's so much more to teaching reading than just word level work. So a discussion about how your team and other teams have found to effectively balance the time in their literacy block when they think about both decodable word level work as well as time in grade level text with literature and informational text standards. We can't just focus on phonics and reading for the lens of phonics when we know there's so much more that goes into reading. It's a tricky balance to strike, but it's something that we're continually striving to work on. So reach out to your team and the teams around you to really think about how do we strike that balance of decodable and non-decodable, as well as this word level work with application in text, as well as the other language and literacy-based activities that we have to do to support kids to be effective readers. So that wraps up our second video. This one really had a lot more of that calibration conversation, so I highly recommend you reach out to your team to learn more about their practices and to sync up. We want to bring some closure, thinking back to how we started these two sessions. We started by activating our knowledge, and we know that in order to intentionally strengthen and build our knowledge, we need to have a routine where we confirm, correct, and elaborate upon our thinking. So think back to what you brainstormed at the very beginning of all the things that you could remember from the phonics tool. What ideas were confirmed through this video series? How many of those things did you think you know and you actually proved you do indeed know quite well? Was there anything you had to correct? Maybe you had an idea of something you thought what the tool meant, but really that practice meant something different. How could you correct that in your practice as well? And probably most applicably, where could you elaborate? What different ideas from these two videos could you add to your prior knowledge? Perhaps that it's that idea of connection or brevity when it comes to PA, or explicit language and checking for knowledge of the pattern and explicitly teaching the pattern. Maybe it's that idea about word lists and how you're intentionally mitigating any of those challenges around word lists as you're checking for that pattern. In decoding, maybe it's just the reminder not to say the word and using those L-coded boxes to match symbol to sound. Or in encoding, it's that idea of where you occasionally can bring in sentence dictation. With connected text, perhaps it's elaborating upon the idea of using both decodable and non-decodable text and the explicit routines that go with each. Take just 1 second to pause the video and reflect. How did your thinking get confirmed, corrected, or elaborated upon? Once you've done that reflection, you can start the video again. Go ahead and pause. Welcome back. We are in the final stretch. Hopefully across these 2 videos, you are able to find 1 or 2 small nuggets of things that we can continue to do to refine our knowledge and implementation of these evidence-based moves. Think about that one thing you want to tweak and make that change in an upcoming lesson to reinforce that learning. Then make a plan for how you want to continue to apply that refinement as you go forward with the rest of the year's planning. All of this work that we're laying this year and the past many years are helping us to build that muscle memory around what is solid phonics instruction. Even as we adopt a curricular resource, these evidence-based practices will not change. This is what good quality instruction looks like. So as we build this muscle memory, and we get our curricular resource, we can more easily identify places where the instruction is strong, as well as any places where we have to tweak that instruction and add in pieces or remove pieces that are not aligned with the science of reading. So please continue to persist and reach out if there's anything that we can do to help. I am Jessie Ketchum, the K-12 Literacy Curriculum Lead, and also your instructional coach would be a great resource. Leverage your teammates and the grades around you as we continue to think about what is that small refinement we can make to help support our students with reading and writing. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.